Times is lost. The New York Times is still the greatest newspaper in America by far, and one of the greatest newspapers in the world. But tonight, the New York Times is lost. The New York Times has no idea how to cover the madness of Donald Trump. And so the New York Times ignores it. Just as the madness of King George III had to be ignored by the London Times in 1789. The Washington Press Corps is lost along with the New York Times. There is no one working at the New York Times tonight who, when they were editing their high school newspapers and dreaming about one day working at the New York Times, ever imagined they would have to cover a president of the United States who uses the official social media communications tools of the White House, government communication paid for by the taxpayer, to post fake videos of the first black minority leader of the United States House of Representatives and the first Jewish minority leader of the United States Senate. When they were working on their high school newspapers, they had no idea there would be a president of the United States who would post videos on a government-operated social media account that put fake words into Chuck Schumer's mouth, which AI makes sound exactly like Chuck Schumer, and that fake language in that video would be filled with Donald Trump-style profanity, language Chuck Schumer would never use in public, but language that the current president of the United States has shocked the world with repeatedly. Donald Trump is the first president of the United States who has been heard publicly and deliberately using profanity repeatedly, words that I can, but I will not use on this program, because as every adult is supposed to know, there are places where profanity is not appropriate. No one taught Donald Trump that. Who's going to bother to stop to talk about Donald Trump's use of profanity when he is sending troops into American cities, that he lies about being a war zone? I agree that it's just too small an item in the daily transgressions of Donald Trump. But remember, don't ever forget that the American news media almost unanimously agrees that Hillary Clinton lost her presidential campaign because she used the word deplorable once to describe some Trump voters, some of whom proved themselves willing to behave deplorably and violently for Donald Trump on January 6th, when they became the only people in American history to attack the Capitol of the United States on behalf of their presidential candidate. There are people working at the New York Times today who will insist to you that Hillary Clinton's use of the word deplorable was in and of itself deplorable. Those same people have nothing to say about Donald Trump's use of language. Absolutely nothing. Those people believed that you cannot possibly be elected president in this country if you use the word deplorable to describe any voters in America. Donald Trump calls us vermin. Donald Trump got elected president calling American voters vermin if they didn't vote for him. Hitler's word, vermin. Donald Trump is now using fake AI sound of Chuck Schumer saying that all Democrats are pieces of crap. And of course, he doesn't use the word crap. I just cleaned that up. But all Democrats. All those wise pundits who've been telling you for years that Hillary Clinton couldn't possibly be elected in this country if she's going to use a word like deplorable in a political campaign referring to voters on the other side, can only make that argument now by completely ignoring every single thing Donald Trump has said publicly about voters who do not vote for him, every single thing he said. When Hillary Clinton used the word deplorable, it was in a private fundraiser. She did not intend for it to be heard outside of that room. Sure, she was way too relaxed in that fundraiser. It's not the kind of thing she would have said publicly. But Donald Trump says deliberately and clearly into microphones for all the world to hear that all Democrats are lunatics. That's his word, lunatics. Donald Trump thinks 75 million Americans are lunatics for voting for Kamala Harris. Donald Trump has said the ugliest things about American voters that any American politician has ever said. And Donald Trump went on to win the Electoral College after saying those things. And the New York Times simply doesn't know how to handle what Donald Trump says and does. I don't know how to handle it either. I feel my way through the Trump mud every day. I don't confidently know what to ignore or what not to ignore. But I do know I have to think about it. I have to think about it all the time. I have to think about it every day. I have to face all of it. And I have to decide what aspects of the Trump poison we should examine in this hour that we have on this program. Tonight, the New York Times and the Washington Press Corps are drowning in the deviancy and perversity of Donald Trump and his White House, all of whom, everyone working in that White House, supports this deeply perverse use of government-operated social media to put out poison and what is clearly raw insanity from the darkness of Donald Trump's mind, and the White House press corps has just drowned in it. They're lost in it. They have internalized it. They have fully accepted it. That is what the New York Times and the Washington media have done so far this week. They have accepted it to the point that when the New York Times wrote its big editorial about the government shutdown, everything it wanted to say about it, titled "The Real Stakes of the Shutdown," they didn't mention what Donald Trump did instead of negotiating a way out of the shutdown. They didn't mention what he has done on social media, putting a sombrero on Hakeem Jeffries' head, putting fake words in Chuck Schumer's mouth, profane, awful, stupid Trump words. They didn't even mention it. The real stakes of the shutdown are insanity versus sanity. And the press corps does not know how to face that. The New York Times refuses to confront and identify the insanity, refuses to even describe it. The Times editorial about the shutdown is a very well-reasoned and clear, solid editorial all the way. It says, what the two parties are fighting about is whether Americans should have access to affordable health care. President Trump is seeking to deprive millions of Americans of their health insurance, and Senate Democrats are refusing to acquiesce. That is a clear presentation of the stakes in the shutdown prior to the outburst of public Trump insanity. The editorial ends with in the classic style that everyone working at the New York Times mastered in their high school newspapers. And it reads like something from the 20th century. It reads like something long before the existence of Trump madness in our government. It reads like something you could have written about Bill Clinton in the White House and Newt Gingrich as Speaker of the House. It says, it is incumbent on the President and Congress to reopen the government as soon as possible and commit to preventing Americans from having to pay too much for health insurance next year. The only way forward is to negotiate a compromise. It's time to start talking. How lost is that? What century are they in? What fantasy world do they live in that would allow them to type those sentences? They could have written that line in any editorial about any government shutdown during any other presidency. But when you read it now, you see how lost the Times is. It's time to start talking to a man who refuses to talk to you and only posts social media video lying about you and ridiculing you. Talk to him. No one in the history of governing in the United States of America has ever had to talk to a person that crazy about anything, ever. And the Times says it's time to start talking. The entire editorial does not find the space to make a single reference to the madness of Donald Trump as even a factor in the government shutdown or in the way out of the government shutdown. And here, I guess, is its reference to Donald Trump's insane social media posting. Quote, he mixed bombastic social media blasts and threats to fire thousands of federal workers if Democrats did not provide the votes for his plan to keep the government open. Bombastic social media blasts. That's what they are? How very polite. No, they're not bombastic. They are insane. Democratic Congresswoman Madeleine Dean approached the Republican Speaker of the House to talk about the Trump madness, and he appeared to offer nodding agreement that Donald Trump is unwell.
The president is unhinged. He is unwell. What are you doing?
A lot of folks on your side are too. I don't control.
Oh my.
He could have said, no, the president is not unwell. Maybe he meant to say that, but he didn't. It was taken as a given in the conversation. He nods when he hears the president is unwell. And his response, as he's nodding, is a lot of folks on your side are too. The word "to" there indicates similarity to what was just said, meaning similarity to Trump. The plain language of that is the speaker, in effect, agreeing that Trump is unwell and simply saying that other people are unwell. That's the speaker's defense of Trump being unwell. He's not the only one. Of course, he is, but okay. The Republican Speaker of the House has to be shocked by what Donald Trump has done on social media. We know he is shocked. But like all Republicans in Washington, he processes the shock instantly and knows he will never dare publicly say a negative word about it because he spends every working moment of his life as a coward. He has taken, in effect, an oath of cowardice to Donald Trump. He's not the Speaker of the House. He's the Speaker of Trump in the House. Now, if I were running the New York Times, which I'm incompetent to do, couldn't do it, I don't know that I could deal with this situation any better than they have done. I really don't. Instead, I just have an hour of television where I can say whatever I want. That's a much easier responsibility than editing the New York Times. And I had never presumed that I can do a better job than the New York Times. I never presumed that I could do a better job than anyone who's at bat in Yankee Stadium out there who strikes out. And so it's not with some sense of superiority that I find the New York Times has struck out in the face of the madness of Donald Trump this week, which has reached new extremes that we haven't seen before, even from Donald Trump. The White House staffers who live with Donald Trump's insanity up close have obviously decided it cannot be defended, and the only thing to do is pretend there's nothing crazy about it. That's what Donald Trump's faithful vice president tried to do yesterday. And now the White House says they will continue to post that video at government expense on official White House communications and make the sombrero bigger every day. That's what the children in the White House are going to do. This is the first president and the first White House that has decided, as J.D. Vance did yesterday, that a shutdown is funny. They've decided it's funny. J.D. Vance thinks the shutdown is an opportunity for jokes and that the sombrero stuff is funny. He didn't explain what's funny about it. Prior to the existence of the Trump White House, whenever the disaster of a shutdown would occur, everyone in the White House took the situation very, very seriously. They didn't have to suppress jokes. They weren't making jokes about it, no matter who the president was. And so the crisis of this week's publicly flaring madness from the White House is made all the worse by the crisis of the New York Times and the Washington Press Corps taking it all as business as usual. They have internalized Trump madness in their coverage. They have lost their ability to react to it. But their outrage will be fully revived if a Democratic candidate for president or if a Democratic president ever says a single negative thing about any kind of American voters, ever, anywhere. The Washington Press Corps' outrage mechanism is sleeping tonight, but it will be fully operative again. once they have a Democrat to aim it at. That's not a partisan statement on my part. It is simply an observable fact. You all saw it. We've all seen it. They cannot pretend this isn't true. We all saw them scream endlessly at Karine Jean-Pierre, Joe Biden's press secretary. We all saw them scream directly at Joe Biden in his face when asking him questions. And we all see that they do not dare ever do anything like that in the Trump White House. They can never, ever deny again that they do indeed have a double standard. And the double standard of coverage favors Trump madness. It accepts Trump madness. And if a Democratic president gets one word wrong in a sentence, he doesn't get a chance to correct it. He's immediately judged to be too old for the job. The double standard is there, and it's going to be operating for the next 3 years of this White House coverage. They're lost. We can only hope that they find their way. There is a stupidest member of the Trump cabinet. It's not Robert Kennedy Jr., who has never had a smart day in his life. He was a heroin addict every day of high school, college, and law school, and so learned nothing and is a functional ignoramus on what he claims to be an expert about. Robert Kennedy Jr. is the most dangerous cabinet member in the history of the cabinet. He's gotten himself into a position to, in effect, kill more Americans than any cabinet member in history. But the stupidest member of the cabinet, the most clownish member of the cabinet, is someone who actually supported Hillary Clinton for president in 2016, and then, in a clear measure of just how much integrity he does have, he immediately switched to support Donald Trump as soon as Donald Trump won the presidency. The stupidest Commerce Secretary in history, Howard Lutnick, has public indication about him indicates that he is a graduate of Haverford College, where he majored in economics. And he said this in a recent interview with the New York Post that was posted yesterday.
And then I went on the campaign trail with him. And I think the most important thing we did is we designed his tariff policy together. We talked it through. He taught me, I tell you what, he taught me everything about tariffs. We designed the tariff policy together. And we talked about his economic policy. I didn't really understand tariffs before I met Donald Trump. I mean, you know, you're a New York businessman. It's not really your world.
Right.
And then once I started talking to him about it, I understood it.
I've never known a high school government student who didn't understand tariffs. I've never known an economics student who didn't understand tariffs. It's one of the simplest things that exist in economic policy. And all economists understand that all tariffs are taxes. They are sales taxes. But there is the stupidest Commerce Secretary in history telling you that he learned about tariffs from the person who had already publicly said the stupidest things ever said about tariffs. What Lutnick always shows in every public comment is how much he slavishly sucks up to Donald Trump. He beats everyone in the sucking up to Trump game. No one comes close. He also cannot fail to reveal himself to be a child who doesn't belong in a governing room with adults.
So, like, he lets me stay for the Joint Chiefs of Staff come in. Right. I'm like, this is like the coolest thing ever.
Coolest thing ever. Lutnick began that interview in the stupidest way I've ever seen anyone begin an interview, especially with a job like his, by literally revealing his home address in New York City, the specific street and number, and pointing out that the person who used to live next door to him was Donald Trump's close friend, Jeffrey Epstein, the sex trafficker and raper of children. And it turns out Lutnick, at least now, is claiming that he had very good instincts about Jeffrey Epstein and a very different reaction to Jeffrey Epstein than his friend Donald Trump had.
We move in 2005. Okay. Jeffrey Epstein is arrested in like 08, I think, or something like that.
Right.
So knock on the door. His assistant on like a Saturday says, Mr. Epstein, your neighbor would like to invite you over for coffee. So my wife and I go next door. You know, we walk the 7 steps,
yes,
right, to the next house for coffee. We share a wall.
Right.
So it's in New York City. So he invites us in. We have coffee in this, and he says, do you want a tour? We said, great.
Interesting.
He's got a really big house.
Every room you went into?
He's got, well, I'll tell you. So his house is like super big, really wide. And so he gives me a tour in the living room, big living room. And then across from it is double doors. I assume it's the dining room.
Yeah.
And he opens the doors and there's a massage table in the middle of the room.
Ooh.
And candles all around and stuff. So I ask very insightful, cutting questions. I say to him, massage table in the middle of your house? How often you have a massage? And he says, every day. And then he gets weirdly close to me.
Ooh.
And he says, and the right kind of massage.
Ooh.
Now my wife is standing here. So she looks at me and I look at her and we say, I'm sorry, we have to go. And we left. And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again. So I was never in the room with him socially, for business, or even philanthropy. If that guy was there, I wasn't going because he's gross.
Will never be in the room with that disgusting person. That seems like a perfectly reasonable reaction to Jeffrey Epstein. But Donald Trump had the opposite reaction to Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump wanted to dance with Jeffrey Epstein literally at parties as much as he could. We've all seen that video. But the feeling Howard Lutnick had for Jeffrey Epstein is the feeling that most rich New Yorkers had for Donald Trump. They wanted nothing to do with that vulgarian. They thought he was gross, to use the Lutnick word. So a question that the White House press corps will never get to ask of Donald Trump is, if Howard Lutnick thought Jeffrey Epstein was gross the minute he met him, why were you his closest friend for 10 years? We will never hear that question from a White House press corps member or anyone else to whom Donald Trump grants an interview, because Donald Trump only chooses people who will not ask questions like that. Howard Lutnick, who didn't have to talk about any of this, stupidly had much more to say about Jeffrey Epstein.
All these other people could hang around him and not see what you saw. Or did they see it and ignore it? Or
No, they participated.
right.
That's what his MO was, get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume, was on video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever. Blackmailed people. That's how he had money. So
what happened to those videos? Why is there now such a dearth of information when, Donald Trump's people are running the FBI and the DOJ?
I assume way back when they traded those videos in exchange for him getting that 18-month sentence, which allowed him to have visits and be out of jail. I mean, he's a serial sex offender. How could he get 18 months and be able to go to his office during the day and have visitors and stuff? It must have been a trade. So my assumption, I have no knowledge, but my assumption is there was a trade for the videos because there were people on those videos.
And have you talked to Donald Trump about this and shared your theory?
No, I mean, he knows the story.
Right.
But
Oh,
my story, that, I was one and done with the guy. He knows that story, but that's it.
He would have been interested in that story.
Yeah, but I don't know. It's a story. It's just a one and done. That guy. Ugh.
And did Trump feel the same way about him?
I don't speak to him about these these are just distractions.
Right.
Right. They're just distractions. You can see Lutnick realizing how stupid he was to go that far into the Jeffrey Epstein discussion once she starts asking him, did Donald Trump agree with you? That's when he realizes the size of the mistake he made. So Howard Lutnick, who lived next door to Jeffrey Epstein, has never talked to Donald Trump about Jeffrey Epstein. The foolish question Lutnick was asked by the New York Post reporter was, did Trump feel the same way about him? To which Lutnick said, I don't speak to him about that. The New York Post reporter apparently had not read a single article about Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. She hasn't seen the video of Donald Trump dancing with Jeffrey Epstein, expressing how he feels about Jeffrey Epstein right there in that video, hanging out with Jeffrey Epstein, hugging Jeffrey Epstein. We know that Donald Trump did not react to Jeffrey Epstein the way Howard Lutnick claims he reacted to Jeffrey Epstein. Howard Lutnick's stupidity has created a problem for Donald Trump trying to put out the Jeffrey Epstein fire that continues to burn every day despite all of the dramatic distractions Donald Trump tries to put out the Jeffrey Epstein fire. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee now want to get testimony from Howard Lutnick about what he knew about Jeffrey Epstein and what he saw in Jeffrey Epstein's home. There is no public evidence that Jeffrey Epstein made or traded blackmail videos in exchange for a light sentence. But could that evidence be in the Epstein files? Howard Lutnick seems to think so. The cabinet member who tries to suck up to Donald Trump more vigorously than any other cabinet member has just made Donald Trump's worst problem worse. California Senator Adam Schiff, who Donald Trump wants to prosecute for nothing, will join us next. It sounds like Donald Trump's stupidest cabinet member, who used to live next door to Jeffrey Epstein, has important information that he should be sharing with the congressional committees investigating Donald Trump's old friend, the sex trafficker and raper of children, Jeffrey Epstein.
That's what his MO was, get a massage, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume, was on video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever. Blackmailed people. That's how he had money. So
what happened to those videos? Why is there now such a dearth of information when, Donald Trump's people are running the FBI and the DOJ?
I assume way back when they traded those videos in exchange for him getting that 18-month sentence, which allowed him to have visits and be out of jail. I mean, he's a serial sex offender. How could he get 18 months and be able to go to his office during the day and have visitors and stuff? It must have been a trade.
Leading off our discussion tonight is Democratic Senator Adam Schiff of California. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and he's one of the people who Donald Trump has ordered his Justice Department to prosecute for nothing. Senator, there's Howard Lutnick saying about Epstein, this guy was the greatest blackmailer ever, blackmailed people. That's how he had money. So Lutnick seems to know an awful lot about how things worked for Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, he certainly seems to, and I think he should come and testify before the Congress. What was so striking to me about that, Lawrence, is when Kash Patel, the FBI director, testified recently, he insisted that there was no evidence that Jeffrey Epstein had trafficked women to anyone other than Jeffrey Epstein. Apparently, Trump's own cabinet doesn't believe the FBI director. And so we're led to believe by the director that the only person on Epstein's list was Epstein. Lutnick doesn't believe that. I think we should hear his testimony. And what's more, they keep blaming the original investigation Alan Acosta led in Florida for their own failure to release the Epstein files. Whatever Acosta did, and I think it's pretty clear he did a terrible job, doesn't excuse the Trump administration from interviewing witnesses, from getting to the truth, from finding out who Epstein trafficked women to, who was on that massage table that the secretary discussed so disgustingly. It doesn't prevent them from doing the investigation that they're criticizing a previous administration for not doing. And it, certainly smacks of a continuing cover-up.
And Senator, this is talk about the stakes in the shutdown, which we did. The stakes in the congressional election. If Democrats win the House or if Democrats win the Senate, you will then be committee chairman. You will then have the subpoena power to actually investigate this.
Well, that's right. We will have the power to do the oversight that the Republicans refuse to. Right now, we're doing a lot of shadow hearings, which we can only do with witnesses who are willing to step forward and cooperate, and many of them have shown great courage. But armed with the subpoena power, we can compel the production of materials, we can compel witnesses to come forward. We can bring in, for example, prosecutors who have quit rather than do unethical things. We can bring in people from the CDC who've been given unethical and immoral edicts. We can do that throughout the federal government, and we can also find out, for example, about the investigation into Tom Homan and the $50,000 in cash that he was offered in a Cava restaurant bag, which the Trump administration made go away as soon as they took office. So there is a lot of work to be done, and the Trump administration people ought to understand that whatever actions they're taking now that transgress the law are going to be brought to the surface during a subsequent Democratic Congress.
Senator Adam Schiff, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, the Democratic candidate for governor in Virginia, Abigail Spanberger, will join us. Donald Trump's shutdown is now the #1 issue in the campaign for governor of Virginia. That's next. Donald Trump has now made himself an even bigger factor in the campaign for governor of Virginia, which will be the single most important election in the country this year. Virginia governor campaigns always occur during the first year of a presidency and are always considered the most important indication of the year about the strength of the two parties. Early voting is already underway with more than 475,000 federal employees and active duty military personnel living in Virginia. The Trump shutdown has now become the top issue in the campaign. Here is Democratic nominee for governor of Virginia, former Democratic Congresswoman Abigail Spanberger, who will join us in a moment.
ये सिर्फ फोन नहीं, ये है एक नया अंदाज़े जिंदगी। कमाल का कैमरा, रोशन तरीन डिस्प्ले और वो तेज रफ्तार परफॉर्मेंस जो हर लम्हा बना दे खास। आईफोन, ये है आपका अगला कदम मुस्तकबिल की तरफ।